I'll start with why meditate. Well, I think perhaps we recognize ourselves in these situations, most of us. We have a lot of thoughts in our mind, and or we're tired, or we cannot sleep in the evenings when we go to bed. So what is happening is that the stream of thoughts covering memories, thoughts, tiredness, energy, joy, restlessness, everything that moves and comes spontaneously in our mind is somehow disturbing us. And perhaps we feel it's too much. And so it's easy to think that, you know, I just think too much and I put myself in a bad mood. Imagine if I could empty my mind of all thoughts and let my heart be at peace. Wouldn't that be nice, Pat? Yeah. So the question is, can we empty our mind, and how good is that, and how is meditation coming into that? So I thought, you know, being a scientist, I thought we would start with an experiment with those of you who participate regarding controlling thoughts and feelings. So if you close your eyes, and then you can think of anything that comes by, but you should not think about elephants. So how did that go? Did you not think about elephants, or was it even so that you had not thought about elephants before, but they came sort of walking into your mind when I said so? It's very easy if we try to control our thoughts and feelings that it gives a rebound effect. That has been shown, for example, in smoke cessation, that people who were instructed not to think about smoking, actually they smoked more than those who were left free, so to say. So this thinking and controlling our thoughts is a bit a difficult thing. So also thinking that meditation should release us from all thoughts is perhaps not the easiest thing to have happening. So controlling the stream of thoughts is then trying to remove mostly unpleasant and disturbing thoughts, not the pleasant ones, of course, those we would like to keep. But it's very common in everyday life, and we talk about positive thinking, you know, don't think about those things, just lift what is positive in your life. And also in different meditation techniques, you know, steer your thoughts towards increased inner peace. And what if that inner sensation is not peace? How can I handle the situation? So Acem's approach is quite different. What we say when we meditate is that we should allow all thoughts to be present. They should come and go as they please. But the thing is that we should not focus directly on the thoughts, but repeat a method sound, which is a neutral sound without any linguistic meaning. And sometimes the thoughts dominate. And when you notice that, just go back to repeating the method sound silently in your mind. This way of acting is utilizing the automatic relaxation response, which was sort of found by Herbert Benson in the 1970s. And it gives a bodily relaxation and also psychological processing. So if we look at Acem in the meditation landscape, there are directive techniques. This is the ones: empty your mind from all thoughts, stop your negative thoughts, just think about what is positive. Then you have a focus, and those negative thoughts or thoughts that you think are not important, they are discarded, so to say. And then we have the non-directive techniques, of which Acem meditation is one. let your thoughts be there independent of their contents. And of course, then they disturb you, but that's sort of the purpose. And actually, research has shown that these non-directive techniques gives a higher activity in psychologically important brain areas. And I will show you part of that shortly. So the principle in Acem meditation is to sit comfortably in a chair or a sofa or your bed with good lumbar support. Meditate for 30 or 45 minutes. And repeat this method sound silently in your mind. And again, it's a word without linguistic meaning. And let the other thoughts come and go without controlling or censoring, independent of their contents. So what does research say about this? If we first look at electrical brain activity, EEG, you can measure the frequency, the level of arousal, localization, regularity, to see the type of activity. And then the research persons are sitting like this, of course, with their eyes closed, and meditate. And all these cables are used to measure what is happening in the brain. And then it looks like this. This is a picture of meditation up here. And then below, the controls who just been resting and closing their eyes. And you can see that there is differences. You can see a higher amplitude. There are more what is called alpha waves than in the control group. It's more regular, and also a different localization. It's more in the frontal parts of the brain. So there are differences between meditation and rest in brain activation. That the frontal part of the brain is more involved is also shown in this study with Acem meditation. It's functional magnetic resonance imaging that is used, and it's quite a special situation because, as I said, you're supposed to sit and meditate and for 30 minutes to get a good effect. But here the person is laying down, and this has quite a lot of sound, and they meditate for 4 minutes in this machine, and then compared to a more directive technique where you focus and concentrate and don't let disturbing thoughts wander. So what is happening actually, even in this quite strange situation, is that we do see a difference between the frontal cortex here. There's higher activity here during a non-directive meditation compared to an active directive technique. So you can imagine that if we would be able to measure for half an hour, we would see even a bigger effect. Another study that came a couple of years ago regarding research on Acem meditation was a study from Norway. Norwegian companies, large companies, were giving, or Acem were giving meditation courses at these companies, with a total of 74 people and a control group that had a stress education for 2 hours. And the effects were measured after 6 months, but also after 2 months and 3 months. And what was measured was the level of mental stress, neuroticism, so emotional instability, quality of sleep, and also musculoskeletal pain. So what were the results here? Let's start with level of mental stress. This level was significantly reduced. And in statistical terms, we can say that it's more than 99.9% probable that this effect will happen. This is a very high probability. And the way these measurements were done was on scales where you measured and asked the individuals regarding different questions, so they could state the level of mental stress. So less mental stress. The second evaluation was the degree of neuroticism. That was also highly significant. What is neuroticism? Well, it's a relatively common personality trait. It has to do with worries, negative thoughts, downgrading of oneself, etc. And I think this picture shows quite well what it's all about. We worry about the future, perhaps, what will happen at work the next day, how's my economy doing, etc. And of course, those worries can be relevant, but they can also be a bit more irrelevant compared to the situation that we are in. So what happened here? Well, the results were that the people became calmer, more confident, more enduring, and more balanced. And this was actually the part of those effects that was most highly influenced. And it's actually quite important in everyday life to be able to feel more calmness, etc. It decreases your stress as well. What about sleep? Well, also the sleep quality increased. This has often to do with falling asleep at night, because that's the time when the thoughts start wandering if you haven't let them wander before during the day. And when you meditate, those thoughts can go quite on their own while meditating, and then you're less prone to find this before falling asleep. And the last aspect was musculoskeletal pain. And that's perhaps the least expected effect, because you think, I've overworked or some kind. But this is also a psychological aspect, that if we feel bad psychologically, that also is put into our body as pains or difficulties, especially in the back or in the neck. That also decreased in this group of meditators. So that's quite amazing, I think. Even if I've meditated for 40 years, I think those effects are quite astonishing compared to what I see in my research areas and the significance and statistical certainty that I see there. So what about mind wandering? This is actually what we talk about. We let the mind wander. And you see the references in the bottom of this slide is from 2007, 2008, 2012. And actually this was the time when mind wandering was starting to be seen as something valuable. And what they say in the research is that this is the brain's natural state of rest. It's not lack of thoughts, it's a spontaneous wandering between more or less temporary thoughts, memories, pictures, moods, and feelings. So this notion of trying to empty our minds in order to feel good is actually wrong, based on this research. What it does is that it processes unresolved residues, it reads other persons, it finds creative solutions, it prepares us for the future. And this happens when we're not active with a specific task. So of course, when we work or when we have a certain task, we need to focus on that one. But in between tasks is when this mind wandering is happening. And it takes place in the default mode network. And what is the default mode network? Well, we'll come to that soon. The mind wandering actually takes place during around half of our awake time. And the mind wanders most when we're at work, actually. And more than half of the time when our mind wanders, we are involved in our emotions. So it's emotional processing that takes place. And half of the time we're mind wandering, we're not aware of that this is happening. So the default mode network is this. And if you see here, things are happening in the frontal part of the brain. Here we have the nose, and also in the back of the brain. And this picture is from the from above. You can see the front here and the back here. There are different centers active. And what we can see on the right-hand side here is quite amazing. There's a study where they have seen and shown the discussion, so to say, the activity between these brain centers. And you can see, if we look at the bottom here from, you can see these centers that they speak together, but also with other centers. And in the middle picture here, we can see that there are also signals going down. And down here we have the amygdala, where is our center for anxiety, for example. So a lot of activity takes place when we're not doing anything specific, focused. There was a study in 2014 on Acem Meditation looking at these aspects, and actually what was observed there was that the activity increased more than in rest during non-directed meditation, which shows that this activity and the processing is really taking place in a more, let me say, efficient way. So this brain default mode network is then more active during rest and during meditation than during active thinking. And these areas, they contribute to the spontaneous stream of thoughts in our mind. And it's analysis and decision making in the front. It's integration of impressions, memories, and feelings in the back, and episodic memories and alarm central down here. And what is happening is that we, based on earlier experiences, so then the brain makes models of the present situation, and this process helps us understand what may happen in the future and how other people think and feel. So spontaneous mind wandering fills several roles. It comforts us. It doesn't feel like that every time, but that's what it does. It's processing feelings, so that sometimes may be difficult. It helps us shift perspectives if we get stuck in a way of thinking. It processes and interprets different memories from our past, and it contributes to increased self-awareness and stimulates increased empathy, promotes creativity, and prepare us for new challenges in the future. So this sounds, doesn't it, like a very valuable function that we do have spontaneous in our mind, if we let it be there. So what happens when our thoughts are hindered in wandering? When we constantly receive impressions from the outside. And I mean, if you walk and meet people, I think more than half are walking with their mobile phones, texting even when they bike, you know, listening to books or doing things, and very seldom are just on their own in nature or on the way back and forth to work. So less processing of our own themes takes actually place then, and less stress reduction, and less of what was listed on the last page. And the question is if this more sick leave with psychiatric diagnosis that we do see today has to do with this, of course with other things as well, but I think this is an important part. So my advice is that give yourself space as a very important health aspect. So if we look at the psychological effects of Acem meditation, this picture, and then we're back to the elephant here again. These are 5 blind men, and they all feel different parts of this elephant. And they all interpret what they feel depending on their earlier experiences. So addressed in a more general way is that we have a reality that we all experience, and then we interpret this reality. And this interpretation has to do with our own experiences, for example, from early life, with our genes, how neurotic we are to start with. And based on this interpretation, which is actually our compass in life, we have to trust this interpretation. We react back on this reality. And this reality may be people at work, or a situation that we find threatening if we have experiences with threatening situations, or with more calmness if that is our interpretation. And our action actually back on these people around us will form how they also interpret us. And we know that when we have people in our surrounding, we can see that, well, you know, this was not what I said. You heard something else than what I meant. And this can be, of course, a problem with both persons, that the person who says something may not be aware of the way that person says it, and or that the person interpreting the situation is interpreting it more based on his or her own experiences than based on what the situation was. So when we meditate, this interpretation is part of the processing of our mind. And in a longer perspective, our interpretations become more like realistic and less influenced by these experiences. But of course, this is basic and very strong psychology, so we will never get rid of everything regarding this. So controlling thoughts and feelings, should we do that? Well, I think you've heard my, my view on that. I would say it's really not worth the energy required to keep them out. It's really not worth it. Just let your thoughts and feelings be there. They are there because of a certain purpose. If you would control your thoughts and feelings, it gives less processing and increased level of stress. And never, of course, during Acem meditation, because then the instruction is to let your thoughts wander. So what about controlling behavior? Yes, we need to control our behavior every now and then. For example, in many social situations, as partner, friend, parent, colleague. And in order to get things done, we actually have to decide to do things that may fill us with resistance otherwise. And it's a volitional activity to repeat the method sound during Acem meditation, which you have to decide to repeat the method sound. Otherwise, it does not come to you when you're sitting there passive. It's an activity. But it's not with a force. That's a difference. You can control your behavior with force or with what we call free mental attitude. So more easygoing way of behaving, so to say, in an okay way in your surroundings and towards yourself. So there has been several positive effects of meditation in cognitive and emotional tests. This is not Acem meditation, we don't have that yet, but other techniques. The first example is that these authors say that the persons who have learned meditating has an improved executive functioning. And what does that mean? It's more correct decisions, less errors, and this is an experimental situation. It's connected to heightened emotional acceptance and less automatic response behavior. And here we have this interpretation that I showed you earlier. So less automatic interpretations and more improved executive functioning. And this is, of course, very important, especially for leaders, but I would say for everyone. Another study showed that there was an enhanced perceptual clarity and decreased automated reactivity. And this is exactly the same thing again. And the third one, and there are many more studies actually showing this, 20-minute meditation increased the access to the unconscious. Meditation increases creativity, which is also relevant for decision making and problem solving. So quite strong, and a multitude of research findings on these positive effects of meditation. So I would like to say then that please don't waste your energy on controlling the wind. And my interpretation here of the wind is all your thoughts and emotions that float around in your mind. But let the thoughts fill your sails while keeping a grip on the ropes, and you'll get a momentum to move forward. And I would like to end by this citation from The Power of the Wandering Mind. It's a book. By nurturing your inner freedom during Acem meditation, you fertilize the very soil in which flexibility, creativity, and innovation thrive. So with that, thank you very much.